My Amish husband told me to stay silent at the doctor after our wedding night. I was 19 years old when I sat inside Dr. Sutter's examination room, with a folded page hidden beneath the cuff of my dress. The room smelled of rubbing alcohol and wet wool. My husband, Amos, sat close enough that his boot touched mine, yet he smiled as though we were strangers waiting for the same train. When the doctor asked what had truly happened in our bedroom after the wedding, Amos leaned toward me. "Stay silent," he said. Why was he afraid of my answer? Why had his mother kept a record of every night he lost control of himself? And why had the doctor already been told that I knew the truth before I married him? I looked down at the paper beneath my cuff. Then I opened my mouth. To explain what I said, I must return to the autumn when Amos first came to our farm. I grew up in a small church district in eastern Pennsylvania, where every family knew which fields belonged to whom, and which troubles were never discussed beyond the kitchen door. In our household, silence was treated as evidence of good character. My mother often said that a peaceful woman did not carry every private sorrow into the road. My father had died when I was 16, leaving us with 22 acres, 3 younger children, and a debt my mother could not pay. By the time I turned 19, the roof above the washroom leaked, our best horse had gone lame, and 2 men from the bank had visited in 1 month. That was when Amos Kaufman began appearing at our Sunday gatherings. He was 27, broad-shouldered and careful with his words. He owned half of his family's dairy farm, and was known for repairing machinery other men had abandoned. He did not laugh loudly or boast about his work. When he spoke to me, he looked directly at my face. To a girl who had spent 3 years watching her mother count coins beside a cooling stove, Amos looked like safety. My mother noticed him before I did. "He has land," she said one evening while we shelled peas. "And he does not drink or waste money." She said nothing about affection. In our house, affection was considered something that might grow after the practical matters were settled. Amos's mother, Esther, visited us the following week. She was a narrow woman with pale eyes and hands that never rested. While my mother prepared coffee, Esther asked whether I slept soundly. "I suppose I do," I said. "Do noises wake you?" "Most noises." Her fingers stopped moving over the edge of her apron. Then she smiled. "A farmer's wife must learn to sleep through many things." At the time I thought she meant calves bawling or rain striking the roof. That was the first warning. I made it harmless because I wanted it to be harmless. Amos began driving me home after youth gatherings. He spoke about the house we would share and the pear trees behind it. He asked whether I would mind living beside his parents until they were older. I told him I would not. He asked whether I frightened easily. I laughed because I thought he was teasing me. What should frighten me? He kept his eyes on the road. Some people become afraid when they see what they do not understand. Before I could ask what he meant, the buggy wheels struck a rut. Amos's body went rigid. His hands tightened around the reins, and for several seconds he stared straight ahead without blinking. The horse slowed on its own. "Amos?" He did not answer. Then he drew a sharp breath and looked at me as though he had forgotten I was beside him. "What were you saying?" he asked. I told myself he was tired. When we reached my house, Esther was waiting near the gate. She had no reason to know exactly when we would return, yet she stepped toward the buggy before Amos had climbed down. "Was the road rough?" she asked him. "Only once." Her gaze moved to me. That night, I remembered her question about how deeply I slept. I still said nothing. Our engagement was announced before Christmas. My mother cried with relief after the service. She held my hands and said my father would have been grateful to know I was joining a secure family. Amos gave her money to repair our roof. He called it a gift. My mother called it mercy. A week later, during a barn raising, I saw Amos standing on a wooden platform with a hammer lifted above his shoulder. Someone called his name, but he did not respond. The hammer slipped from his fingers and struck the boards near another man's foot. 2 of Amos's brothers moved quickly. One guided him down, while the other told everyone he had been fasting. Esther appeared with a small black notebook. She wrote something inside it, closed it, and placed it beneath her apron. When she noticed me watching, she said, "Your future husband works harder than most men." I asked what she had written. "Farm business." She walked away before I could ask anything else. I considered speaking to my mother, but the new roof had already been ordered. My brothers were talking about keeping the farm. For the first time since my father's death, my mother slept through the night. I decided a moment of dizziness was not enough to disturb an entire family. Amos and I married in February of 1968. Our wedding day was plain and crowded. The house smelled of roast chicken, coffee, and damp coats. Women carried dishes between rooms, while men stood near the barn discussing the frozen ground. Amos seemed calm, until the final guests began leaving. Then I saw his hands trembling. Esther took me aside beside the pantry. "If he becomes restless tonight, do not argue with him." I thought she was giving me the kind of private marriage advice older women delivered through unfinished sentences. "What do you mean by restless?" "He may walk. He may speak strangely. Keep the lamps low." "Has this happened before?" Her mouth tightened. "Marriage requires trust, Rebecca." It was not an answer, but by then I was already wearing his name. Our bedroom was on the second floor of the farmhouse, beneath a sloping roof. Esther had placed a blue and white wedding quilt over the bed. A pitcher of water stood beside a wash basin, and the room smelled faintly of cedar from the chest at the foot of the bed. Amos locked the door after us. He sat on the edge of the bed without removing his boots. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "Whatever happens tonight, you must not call for anyone." I felt heat rise into my face. Why would I call? He looked toward the door. "Promise me." I could hear Esther moving in the hallway. She had not gone downstairs with the others. Before I could answer, Amos pressed his palms against his eyes. His shoulders pulled tight. He tried to stand, but his knees gave way. He fell against the washstand. The basin shattered. What followed lasted only a few minutes, though in my memory it stretched across the entire night. Amos's body moved beyond his control. He could not answer me. When I tried to keep him from striking the broken furniture, the washstand tipped and trapped my wrist beneath one edge. I screamed once. The locked door opened almost immediately. Esther entered carrying the black notebook. She did not ask what had happened. She already knew. She knelt beside Amos and turned him carefully onto his side. Then she looked at my wrist, which had begun swelling. "You fell while preparing for bed," she said. I stared at her. "He needs a doctor." "No. He could be badly ill. He has spells. They pass." "You knew?" Her expression did not change. "You are his wife now. Lower your voice." Amos woke near dawn. He remembered entering the room but little else. When I told him about the fall, shame moved across his face. For one moment, I thought he would apologize. Instead, he asked whether anyone outside the house had heard me scream. My wrist had turned dark with bruising. I could not bend 2 fingers. Even Esther agreed that I needed to see Dr. Sutter, though she insisted Amos accompany me. Before we entered the doctor's office, Amos stopped me beneath the porch roof. "You tripped over the washstand," he said. "That is not what happened. It is close enough. You became ill." His jaw tightened. "Do not use that word." "What word?" "Ill." He stepped nearer, lowering his voice. "Tell him you fell. Say nothing about me." Inside, Dr. Sutter examined my wrist. He was an older man with silver hair and a habit of pausing before each question. He asked how I had fallen. I repeated the story Amos had given me. The doctor looked at the shape of the bruising. "Was the furniture already moving when it struck you?" I did not understand the question. Amos answered for me. She was frightened and confused. Dr. Sutter's eyes moved from Amos to me. "Did your husband collapse?" The room became very quiet. I looked at Amos. He did not threaten me. He did not raise his voice. He simply rested one hand on the back of my chair and waited. "No," I said. Dr. Sutter wrapped my wrist and told me it was badly sprained but not broken. Before we left, he asked Amos to step outside so he could discuss the bandage with me. Amos refused. "My wife and I do not keep separate concerns." Dr. Sutter stared at him for several seconds. Then he said, "Sometimes separate answers prevent shared harm." I did not understand the warning until much later. During the first month of our marriage, Amos had 3 more spells. The first happened in the barn. The second occurred at supper, when he stopped chewing and stared toward the wall while his hand tightened around a spoon. The third came during the night. After each one, Esther entered the date in her black notebook. I asked to see it. She told me it contained milk totals. When I pointed out that she never carried it while milking, she said I had developed an unhelpful curiosity. Restrictions entered my life so quietly that I noticed them only after they had become routine. I was not to invite my mother without Esther's permission, because visitors disturbed Amos. I was not to drive the buggy alone after sunset, because I might speak carelessly if Amos became unwell in public. I was not to write detailed letters to my married sister in Ohio. When I asked why, Amos said a husband had the right to privacy inside his own home. At first, he was gentle after the spells. He would sit beside the stove with his head lowered and ask whether he had frightened me. I always said no. That answer seemed to calm him, so I kept giving it. Sometimes he admitted he had experienced the episode since he was a boy. Other times he claimed there was nothing wrong with him at all. Esther blamed exhaustion, certain foods, winter air, my questions, and once the red thread I had used to mend his shirt. Anything could be blamed except the illness itself. I began sleeping lightly. Every movement woke me. Each night I listened for a change in Amos's breathing. I moved the washstand away from the bed and kept the floor clear. I learned how to protect him during an episode, though nobody had properly taught me. What frightened me most was not his condition. It was the fact that everyone expected me to manage it, while pretending it did not exist. 3 months after the wedding, I visited my mother. I told her Amos suffered spells that made him lose awareness. I told her his family had known, and that I had been ordered to lie to the doctor. My mother folded a dishcloth into a smaller and smaller square. "Many families have private burdens," she said. "This burden could hurt him. You are his wife." I was not told. She stopped folding. "Would you have married him if they had told you?" "No." The word came out before I could soften it. My mother looked toward the window. "Then perhaps they feared you would judge him without understanding." That was when I realized she was not surprised. "What did you know?" She stood and carried the dishcloth to a drawer. "Only that he sometimes became faint." "Before the wedding?" She closed the drawer carefully. "Your brothers still have a home because the Kaufmans helped us." I felt as though the room had shifted beneath me. "You knew." "I knew he needed a steady wife. You gave me to them because we owed money." Her face tightened with pain, but she did not deny it. "I kept this family from being scattered. I left before supper. For years I believed my mother had chosen land over me. Age has made the truth more complicated, though not kinder. She was a frightened widow with children to feed. The Kaufmans placed rescue in one hand, and my future in the other. She chose the hand she believed would save the most people. Understanding that has never made the choice right. My first attempt to seek help ended there. The second began with Miriam Lapp, a widowed midwife who lived beyond the mill. Miriam had treated my mother during her final pregnancy, and was one of the few women Esther did not control. I visited her under the excuse of delivering eggs. She listened without interrupting as I described Amos's spells. When I finished, she said, "A medical condition is not a moral failure." Nobody had ever spoken those words in my presence. "Can he be helped?" "He can be examined. There may be ways to reduce the danger. His mother says doctors will only shame him." His mother is protecting a secret. That is not the same as protecting her son. Miriam wrote Dr. Sutter's office hours on a small page torn from an almanac. I hid it inside the lining of my glove. For the first time since my wedding, I felt that a door might exist where I had seen only walls. Then, in June, I found the black notebook. Esther had gone to visit her sister. Amos and his father were cutting hay. I was looking for a missing set of sewing needles when I noticed that one drawer in Esther's cabinet was shorter inside than outside. A thin board had been fitted across the back. Behind it lay the notebook. The first pages contained dates from 11 years before I married Amos. Beside each date, Esther had written a few words. "Fell near silo. Lost speech at table. Doctor says further examination required. Amos refuses." Then I found a name I recognized. Leah Stoltzfus. Leah had once been engaged to Amos. I had been told she ended the engagement because she wanted electricity, fashionable clothes, and a life outside the church. The notebook told a different story. Leah witnessed spell. Leah spoke to doctor. Engagement ended. Bishop agrees her account must not spread. 2 pages later, another entry appeared. Doctor warned no future marriage without full disclosure. My hands began shaking. The final entry before our wedding contained only one sentence. Rebecca's mother informed in sufficient terms. I read it 3 times. The notebook was not a record of Amos's illness. It was a record of everyone who had helped conceal it. When Amos returned, I placed the notebook on our kitchen table. He stopped in the doorway. "Where did you find that? You were not permitted to marry without telling me." His face lost its color. "My mother writes things too severely." "Did the doctor warn you?" He sat across from me. For several minutes, I heard only flies striking the screen and the slow ticking of the clock. Then he said, Leah looked at me, as if I were no longer a man. "You let everyone call her disobedient. She was going to tell people. Because you lied to her." He covered his face with both hands. I had prepared myself for anger. His grief unsettled me more. He told me the spells had begun after a childhood fever. As he grew older, his father warned that a public diagnosis might make others doubt his ability to inherit the farm. When Leah ended their engagement, the humiliation became a family story that could not be questioned. "I thought if I had a wife who stayed," he said, "I could prove there was nothing wrong with me." "You did not need a wife. You needed a witness who would lie." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. I was afraid. That was the moment of hope. Not because he denied what he had done, but because he finally named the fear beneath it. Amos agreed to see Dr. Sutter. He promised we would go without Esther. He said I could tell the doctor everything. For 2 weeks, he was lighter. He helped me move the heavy furniture from our room. He asked what happened during his spells, and listened to the answer. Once, he thanked me for keeping him safe. I began imagining a marriage built from truth instead of vigilance. The evening before our appointment, Bishop Yoder arrived. Esther had discovered the notebook was missing. Amos had returned it to her without telling me. The bishop sat at our table, while Esther stood behind his chair. He said private illness should be handled within the family. He said my questions had weakened my husband's confidence. He said Dr. Sutter did not understand the spiritual needs of our district. Then he placed a prepared statement on the table. It said I had known about Amos's condition before the wedding and had willingly accepted responsibility for his care. "Sign it," Esther said. I looked at Amos. He did not meet my eyes. "You promised me." The bishop folded his hands. A frightened man may make promises he later understands to be unwise. I pushed the paper away. Amos finally looked up. "If you sign, all of this can end." "No. It will only become official." His expression hardened. "You are my wife, and I am still a person." That night he removed the wheels from our buggy, so I could not leave alone. The next morning, my mother arrived. I had not sent for her. Esther had. My mother asked me to sign the statement. She said the Kaufmans could demand repayment of the money they had given us. My brothers might lose the farm after all. The deepest betrayal was not discovering that my mother had known something before the wedding. It was watching her ask me to make the lie permanent. I asked whether she believed I should spend my whole life afraid to sleep. She began to cry. "I do not know how to save all of you," she said. "Then save the one standing in front of you." She could not. After everyone left, I copied the most important entries from the black notebook onto the page Miriam had given me. I wrote the dates of Amos's spells, Dr. Sutter's warning, Leah's name, and the statement claiming I had been informed. I hid the page beneath my dress cuff. The following week, Amos suffered a spell while carrying a lantern through the barn. I reached him before the lantern fell into the straw. The glass cracked against the floor. A small flame appeared along one edge of the hay. I smothered it with my apron. Amos woke to find me kneeling in the smoke with my hands blackened. That was the moment I stopped asking whether speaking would damage my marriage. Silence had already placed every person in that house at risk. I told Esther I would attend the doctor's appointment whether Amos came or not. Perhaps she believed she could still control what I said. Perhaps Amos wanted to prove I would obey him in public. Either way, they repaired the buggy. That is how I came to sit inside Dr. Sutter's examination room, 8 months after my wedding, with Amos's boot touching mine, and the copied page hidden beneath my cuff. Dr. Sutter examined the small burns on my hands. "How did the lantern fall?" he asked. Amos answered, "She was careless." The doctor looked at me. "Was your husband conscious when it happened?" Amos leaned closer. "Stay silent," he said. Those were the same words he had spoken after our wedding night, though I understood them differently now. He had not wanted silence merely because he felt ashamed of his condition. His family had told the doctor that I had been fully informed before the marriage. My answer could expose their deception, the bishop's cooperation, my mother's bargain, and Amos's choice to risk both our lives rather than accept help. Silence protected everyone except the person required to keep it. I pulled the page from beneath my cuff. No, I said. He was not conscious. Amos's face changed. Dr. Sutter held out his hand, and I gave him the page. I did not know before I married him, I continued. I was told to lie after our wedding night. His mother has kept records for years. You warned them not to arrange another marriage without disclosure. Amos stood so quickly that his chair struck the wall. You are confused. I am not. You do not understand what they will do to us. I looked at him. What have they left to do? Dr. Sutter asked Amos to sit down. Amos refused. He accused me of humiliating him, then accused the doctor of turning a wife against her husband. The doctor's voice remained calm. Your wife did not create your condition. She did not create the deception surrounding it. She is describing danger because the people responsible for helping you have chosen secrecy instead. Amos stared at me, as though he were waiting for the younger Rebecca to return, the girl who would make a frightening thing harmless because everyone needed her to. That girl was still inside me. But she no longer controlled my answer. Dr. Sutter offered to arrange an examination for Amos. He explained that seeking treatment would not erase his dignity or his ability to work. Amos listened for several minutes. Then he asked whether the doctor would promise never to record what I had said. The doctor would not. Amos walked out. He left me at the office. Miriam arrived an hour later because Dr. Sutter had sent word to her. She took me to a boarding house run by women from another church community. I carried one dress, my damaged apron, and the page I had copied from Esther's notebook. I did not return to the Kaufman farm. Bishop Yoder announced that I had abandoned my husband during illness. My mother did not speak to me for nearly 4 years. My brothers kept the farm, though I later learned the Kaufmans never demanded repayment. The threat had been more useful to them than the money. Amos and I separated under civil law. In our district, some people treated that decision as proof that every warning about me had been correct. For a time, I believed them. I found work sewing uniforms in town. I learned to sleep without listening for someone else's breathing. I learned that a locked door could mean privacy rather than danger. Years later, my mother came to see me. She brought the same dishcloth she had folded during our conversation, though by then it was thin and faded. She apologized without asking me to pretend her fear had been wisdom. I did not forgive her in one afternoon, but I allowed her to return. Amos eventually accepted medical care after suffering a public episode at an auction. His condition became more manageable, though the years of concealment had already cost him much of the farm and nearly every close relationship he had. He wrote to me once. The letter contained no request for reconciliation. He said, I thought being known would destroy me. I did not understand that forcing you to hide me was destroying us both. I kept the letter, though I never answered it. Amos died many years later. His younger sister mailed me a parcel after the funeral. Inside was Esther's black notebook. The first pages still contained the dates of his childhood spells. The middle held Leah's name, Dr. Sutter's warning, and the sentence about my mother being informed. Near the end, I found one final entry written in Amos's hand. Rebecca spoke. There was no accusation beside it, only the date. I am 77 now. For most of my life, I believed courage would feel like certainty. It did not. In that doctor's office, I was frightened of losing my home, my family, my church, and the husband I still pitied, despite what he had done. I spoke while afraid. That was enough. Amos's illness did not make him cruel. Fear did not make my mother heartless. Tradition did not make every person in our district dishonest. But fear, obedience, and tradition were all used to demand my silence. Understanding why people failed me has helped me release some anger. It has not required me to rename betrayal as love. The black notebook remains in the top drawer of my desk. Esther filled almost every page with the things she believed must never be spoken. The final page is still blank. I keep it that way to remind myself that an empty page belongs to the person who chooses not to write, not to the person who was forbidden to speak.